There's a power creep problem in Limbus Company. However, Project Moon have already laid out the breadcrumbs and are already on track to deal with this. By the end of this video, I'll show you exactly where I think this path leads and why it might turn your most overpowered centers into a massive liability and why you might have to run Sunshower Heathcliff instead of Index Yi Song.
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
Every gacha player knows the disease of vertical power creep. The formula is simple. Print a new character with 20% more damage, which invalidates the units you spent all of last year building, and turn the game into a mindless math equation where the only thing that dictates victory is having the bigger numbers and the better characters. Let's face it, for the first 8 Cantos, Limbus Company was heading down this exact same path, or at least a path adjacent to it. Project Moon didn't hold back. They took their base coin flip system and pushed the math to the absolute extreme. We saw clash requirements skyrocket, enemies rolling unbreakable red coins, and passive so long they can become literal reading comprehension tests. The game became a pure vertical arms race. I mean, think about it. There's no reason to use Lost Mariacha's Sinclair when you can just use Index Yi Song. Units like Index Yi Song represent the absolute ceiling of standard Limbus. Massive base power, massive plus coins, designed purely to overwhelm the enemy with even bigger numbers. But here's the reality. Project Moon cannot keep doing this. If they just keep inflating the clash numbers and adding more text for the next 4 Cantos, people will notice. Which is why I think starting with Canto 10, Limbus Company is going to have a massive combat overhaul.
Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Think about it. Canto 9 was the beta test for future combat systems in Limbus Company. When Project Moon designed the Roach Emperor, they dropped the biggest breadcrumb for the future of the game's combat by introducing completely new physical law to the UI, the green coin. For years, the fundamental rule of Limbus Company was simple. Reach 45 sanity, roll heads, and win the clash. It was brute force, but the green coin completely shatters that logic. It's a mechanic that doesn't care about your massive stats or your raw vertical power. It forces you to stop playing a math coin simulator and start playing horizontally around the enemy's abilities and momentum. This is what horizontal scaling looks like. It's no longer about who clashes harder, it's about navigating a new set of physical laws within the combat system. And if you know Project Moon's history, you know exactly why the shift is happening right now in the lore. It comes down to a massive and undeniable power gap. Thanks to the recent Walpurgis Night reveals, we know exactly where our sinners stand. The sinners individually are sitting around the Urban Plague tier. But the enemies we are starting to face in the story? They are crossing the thresholds into the urban nightmare and even serve the city threat levels. Even with our strongest identities, fighting these entities in a head-to-head vertical clash is an unwinnable arms race. Project Moon's solution is to shift the battlefield horizontally with mechanics like the green coin. This design forces players to outsmart these new threats, navigate their specific gimmicks, and completely bypass the need for raw stat inflation.
Now, end this! Sorry to disappoint you, Yugi. Huh? You triggered my trap card!
This brings us to the endgame theory. If the green coin was the first step into horizontal scaling, here's the next logical leap from Project Moon to exactly why your most overpowered sinners are about to fall into a massive trap. Right now, the meta is entirely dominated by skills with multiple coins. Having 3 or 4 coins on a single attack is the absolute standard for dealing massive damage nowadays. But imagine Project Moon introduces another physical law to the UI. Let's call it the purple coin. This coin completely inverts the rules of engagement. The purple coin aggressively punishes the sinner based on the amount of coins that they bring to the fight. Bringing a massive 5-coin nuke to a purple coin clash, and your top tier unit will lose every single time. Against a purple coin, the clash does not favor the highest raw numbers. All of a sudden, that overpowered sinner is no longer carrying your team. They're actively throwing the run because the enemy is weaponizing your own bloated kit against you. And this is exactly where the benched first tier units come back from the dead. Take an identity like Lost Mariachi Sinclair. He's been completely left behind by the vertical arms race, but against a boss spamming low power purple coins, his kit with low coin power is exactly the tool you need to survive the encounter. Sunshower Heathcliff is another example of this. With all of his negative coins becoming positive, all of a sudden he can now clash as well as some nurse fathers. This will not magically make early identities the undisputed top tiers, nor will it outright replace your modern units. Instead, it'll create a deep and actual nuance in team building and decision making. You'll have to look at the enemy's specific mechanics and coins and carefully construct a roster and team designed to counter them rather than blindly relying on the same 7 overpowered characters for every single fight.
In case I don't see ya. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Yeah.
Project Moon has always operated differently from the rest of the gacha industry. They care about the world, their characters, and the actual experience of playing their games far more than running a repetitive stat treadmill. They proved that they could handle complex reality-bending combat in the Library of Ruina, and they are laying the groundwork to do it all over again here. By shifting to horizontal scaling, they completely sidestep the inevitable death of vertical power creep. They protect the value of the units we've already spent years building while forcing us to engage with the game's combat system on a much deeper level. Canto 10 is the horizon for a completely modernized Limbus Company. The era of blindly hitting win rate is coming to an end, and honestly, I'm all for it. But I want to hear your theories. If Project Moon introduces something like the purple coin in Canto 10, which forgotten benched sinner do you think will suddenly become the ultimate demon? Also, I want to ask you all a quick question. Would you be interested in watching raw, unedited gameplay of my Mirror Dungeon Extreme runs where I explain my team building process? Or are there other corners of the Project Moon universe you want me to analyze next? Let me know down there in the comments. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit subscribe and like the video. I'm tracking every piece of lore and game design Project Moon drops as we get closer to the start of the city. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.